in the conversation with Mission Control, the whole business about reporting the part of the ship that suddenly has gone wrong, and Hal being involved with that, they also had my part of the conversation with Mission Control, which was very similar. And it was a very technical language, from my point of view, very difficult to memorize. So I spent weeks, I was really worrying about whether I could get it under my belt, because it's very hard to memorize gobbledygook in a sense. Anyway, I did memorize it, and it was shot, and it was never used. The reason he didn't use it, because it was redundant. You heard enough of that kind of dialogue from Mission Control. But because of the way I had to memorize it, if you remember when you were a kid, you were in school, and maybe your English teacher asked you to memorize certain poems, and you had to memorize them by rote, I bet you remember a lot of those poems that you had to. Anyway, I still remember it, and went like this. Mission Control is X-ray Delta 1. At 1920 on board fault prediction center on a 90000 computer showed Alpha Echo 35 unit is possible failure within 48 hours. Request check your in-ship system simulator. Also confirm your approval our plan to go EVA and replace Alpha Echo 35 units possible failure. Mission Control is X-ray Delta 1 transmission concluded. That's 38 years, no, that's 40 years ago.
Get to Q&A. Just a quick thing. Years ago, I did the pilot for Star Trek, and so even though this is a 2001 day, as you know, the pilot is the one that got it on television. So I have sold a few Star Trek pictures here today. So in the Q&A, don't be intimidated by this adoration for 2001 if you have a question.
About 2001, we on occasions you've spoken about Kubrick, of course, but I want to ask a bit about Arthur C. Clarke, because he was present during the filming. What was his role, and what was your relationship like with him? Did he have any play with you as the actors, or did he work through Stanley, or what was the dynamic there?
I can tell you one moment that well, you were there. We're flying on the airplane back to California after premiering in Washington and New York. And now we're flying back to California. We're in a 707 blasting toward the coast, the other coast. And Arthur said something about how much he enjoyed seeing the movie. And Arthur turned, and I remember, I don't know if he said it to you or me or jointly, Ray Lovejoy, the editor, was with us. And Arthur said, it's almost like an awakening, because he really didn't, I mean, he helped create everything, but he never saw it all together until, you know, when we saw it. And Arthur C. Clarke said that morning, he said, you know, I don't really know that much about cinema. I knew Stanley was a great director, and I really looked forward to collaborating with him, but I have to tell you something. I don't think anybody on this earth could have made that movie. And do you remember, because we're film guys, we look at him like, you got that right, baby.
Now, I just thought you might appreciate this quick story about a year later, when Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were waiting to step out onto the moon. They were anticipating it by about 24 hours, and I was filming a film in Bermuda. Well, no, it wasn't Bermuda. It was one of those other characters. It was in the Caribbean, actually. And they wanted to bring me up to have sort of human interest stories for fill time, because they didn't know how long it was going to be. You know, they didn't just land and step out of the vehicle. They had to wait until certain conditions were right, and it was going to be hours. So they flew me up. They sent down a private jet, and I went up to New York and to the CBS studios, and I was interviewed with the idea being that they wanted to interview an actor who'd most recently played an astronaut, and one of the original portrayals of an astronaut, which was Buster Crabbe, who did the original Flash Gordon. So they had Buster Crabbe and myself being interviewed by a well-known man from CBS, and we finished it, and suddenly someone rushed into the studio and said, "Follow me into the control room! They're coming out!" And they were, and therefore, by the way, they never used the interview over the air, because they came out of the vehicle earlier than they expected. So I sat down, and all those screens you see in the TV control room were all the same shot of the ladder coming down. I think it was in black and white. And I just happened, and then Armstrong started coming down, and I looked over. I hadn't noticed who was sitting there, and it was Arthur C. Clarke. So and there were tears streaming down his cheeks. And in fact, I kind of get chills when I think of it right now, as I describe it. That was quite a moment.
I think there's very few people who would deny that this film is an indisputable classic, but like a lot of films that become indisputable classic, at the time of its original release, it was maybe misinterpreted, underappreciated. It certainly was a box office flop. What were your thoughts at the time? You had to attend the premieres and you know, some pretty negative reviews, and with the critical reputation and popular reputation it's gained since. What are your thoughts on that?
When the film opened up, we didn't get very good reviews, but within about 8 or 9 days, the lines began to build. There was more than one critic that had to eat crow.
Interestingly enough, there were some critics, important critics. I don't remember all their names. I can remember that one of them, for example, worked for Newsweek magazine, a very important magazine. There were a few that had, among that group of critics that panned this, who wrote follow-up reviews a month or so later and essentially said, I was wrong. This is a great film. So that doesn't happen very often. And you can't keep a good man down. I think it's just that the public was they were the people that made this film successful, and it became very successful.
Apart from the fact that Kubrick was very prepared, how did he differ from other directors you'd worked with? I'm not maybe comparing him with hacks on routine projects, but even accomplished directors. How exactly was it that Kubrick had that special something as an artist?
Well, I can tell you, I worked for some great directors in my life. I did a film called Splinter in the Grass with Elia Kazan, who was considered, I guess Kubrick and Kazan were the most famous, weren't they, at that time? And, you know, Kazan, everybody adored him and everything, but, you know, there wasn't any comparison. I mean, Kazan was one of these guys who loved to get in the actor's hair, and I didn't particularly care for him that much. But Kubrick stayed way out of your face during filming, or when the camera was rolling. He would never speak to you to break your wall or your train of thought or your concentration. I mean, he always did what he could to prepare, right? And then when action was called, as Keir once said, he created a comfort zone, and that's what it was all about.
He did two very important, I mean, all great directors, what they have in common, and Stanley had it in spades, they, number one, cast brilliantly. And if you cast right, you don't have to do a lot of direction. If you cast right and you trust yourself, it takes a certain kind of confidence to not over-direct, to just let them go. And secondly, to, as Gary just said, create an atmosphere of safety where the artist is willing to take a risk. Because only if you're willing to risk falling on your face do you find sometimes in those actions bits of magic that you might not have gotten with a lesser director. So he was very low-key, very supportive, and as you said, extremely prepared.